Hey, Sam here from Epoch Music. I'm going to walk you through the musical brief that I put together for our award-nominated video game soundtrack, Nine Realms Revolt. Okay, so here we are in the brief summary, which I created because I didn't want to overwhelm the game devs with the full brief, which is quite detailed. But basically, Yggdrasil is the center of Norse mythology, and it links together as the world tree, all of the realms, the 9 realms, and it's considered by people to be an ash tree. And ash trees, in my research, I discovered have leaves that have an uneven number of leaflets. 7 was the most common result that I've found when looking this up, and decided that that would be a good number to use, and it's used throughout the music in both the themes and the structure of the music. And ash trees also bear a fruit called samara, and the samara has 1 seed. And so we utilize the idea of 1 in the music as well. So these are the 2 fundamental principles in the music. I also want to speak to the fact that this brief was cyclical in nature in regards to how the music came back to inform the brief. Every project's going to be different and require something different. This project, I went with my gut and my interest and explored Norse mythology, and from that mythology I drew on concepts that I thought would be interesting to utilize in the music. When I started to utilize the concepts in the music, the brief started to change. So it was not that I set up a framework and a structure from the get-go. There was a partial framework and a partial structure and some ideas and seeds that were planted. And we'll explore a little bit of this in the full brief. So here we have the full brief, and I'm going to start a couple of pages down again with Yggdrasil and just show you what this looks like. This is what you would call a work in progress, I suppose, because the brief was never finished. As I was saying, the music came back to inform the brief, and there wasn't a need to come back and finalize it as if it was a piece of work that we were going to release itself. So you'll see a lot of strange things here that probably make no sense to you, and probably at this point don't make much sense to me, but we'll try and work it out and discover what is in here. So I really like visual elements, and I thought this was a really beautiful image of Yggdrasil, and it was very evocative. And I really liked how it visually linked together all the realms like that. And each realm in this image has a hint of the flavor of the realm. Or not even a hint, I mean, it's quite detailed. So this was a really good way to get started and to find some inspiration. So there's a lot of detail here about what Yggdrasil is. We've been over that, and we've been over the parts that are most significant in regards to the music. You'll see orange text here and there, and that is my in-the-moment response to information. And some of it makes sense, some doesn't, some's used, some is not, some I forget about entirely. It's just really a matter of getting thoughts and ideas out. And even if I don't remember every single note that I make, it's in there, it's in the subconscious, and it all mixes together and comes together, slowly as you build the brief, or as I built this brief. So here we have the battle locations, which are the realms where the game and the levels take place. I'll describe a little bit about each realm. Helheim, which is the homeland of the elves. Muspelheim, which is a volcanic type area with a fire giant. Midgard, which is the home of man. Vanaheim, which is the home of the nature gods. Helheim, which is self-explanatory. And Asgard, which is home to the other gods, who I believe are the most popular. So here we're looking at the approach to the compositional textures and colors, which is pretty rough, and it's very much a draft. But the realm is in green, and in black is a description of instruments and colors and textures that I thought would suit each of the realms. So for the homeland of the elves, which is Alfheim, I thought female breathy vocals, and I've listed specific libraries there as well that I like. Muspelheim, low brass, textural low strings, that sort of thing. Midgard, male and female choir, some solo instrumentation, viola da gamba, and make it feel more tribal and town-like. Vanaheim, foresty sounds, similar to the Alfheim textures, but perhaps grander. There you go, more godlike. Helheim represents hell, so anything dark and low, and again I've listed a couple of libraries there. Asgard, home of the best known gods, I thought should have powerful orchestration and chords, homophonic textures, low drums, horns, and low brass. This was what came to me in the moment. This is my gut and intuition, and things probably changed. I think that the basic outline and the basic idea was right for these. When it comes to implementation and actually writing the music, things change and develop. But that's a basic outline. This heading, approach to compositional consistency and considerations, is basically me trying to work out how are we going to make the soundtrack consistent in terms of its sound through themes or orchestration and colors. Basically we went with number one, which is to have a motif or an idea that is then adapted to the instrumentation through each realm. The other was to have the same orchestration and tempo for the battle tracks, but with different themes. So there, the consistency would have come through the orchestration, but I don't think that would have been as effective. So we utilized a consistent theme or motif or some compositional ideas and concepts that we then applied and adapted to each realm and each realm's instrumentation. So here, the Yggdrasil motif and the Yggdrasil theme. This is sort of rough and early days, but the motif at this point is pretty spot on, and that was to reharmonize a single repeated note, which is a representation of the single-seeded fruit samara from the ash tree. And that is utilized in a way where there's a palindromic chord progression, and that note is repeated as the chord progression changes around that note. The Yggdrasil theme, this is sort of a rough idea, a sketch, and it's me trying to work out how are we going to use the idea of the leaflets, the odd number of leaflets. So this is where I really start to flesh out the idea of the palindromic chord progression and the repeated singular note. So repeated three-note motif that's reharmonized with three different chords. The chords are played in a series of 7, i.e. 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, 1. The uneven number represents the uneven number of leaflets on an ash tree leaf, whilst the palindrome represents the symmetry of the opposite leaflets. So you got 2, 2, 2, 1. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, 1. The battle themes are 7/4 with chord changes underneath. You could also think about it as 3/4 plus 4/4 or whatever. But we wanted to use the idea of 7 in the music. So the total being 7 matches the 7 chords in the palindrome and the 7 leaflets on the ash leaf. I don't know if that made any sense, but it does to me because I've thought about it for so long. But that is really the most significant way in which the Norse mythology was used in the music. And it took some research and a bit of playing around with ideas. But I felt pretty excited and happy to have come to this conclusion about how to utilize the Norse mythology in this way. And here again, this is sort of a rough idea or a rough outline of what I thought the key and the chord structure should be how to utilize the motif in each of the realms. Phrygian dominant. I think that's the key that Howard Shore uses for the Wood Elves in Lord of the Rings. So I definitely stole that. Muspelheim, D minor motif does its thing, and then I talk about what I think would be good in the chord progression there and why. Midgard, the same thing. A Dorian key, because that is very common in fantasy, and it's very much a heroic but positive key, I find. So I think it works well for Home of Man, and I'm pretty sure Howard Shore uses Dorian for the writers Rohan, or one of the human themes. I can't remember. So look at me, just like everyone else, ripping off the great composers. The movement of melody and motif is more human and expressive. So I'm talking about potential or possible movements in the motif here, as opposed to just being one repeated note. So this is where the idea develops and the music can come back to inform the brief, basically. In Vanaheim, D minor or modal mixture, to be honest, I don't remember exactly what I meant, but I'm guessing that I played around with the chords here and the chord structure, and again, this probably came back to inform the brief. So I thought, you know what, this chord progression sounds like it suits Vanaheim, and so therefore I'm just going to write a note of what it is I'm roughly doing, which was D minor modal mixture. With Helheim, pretty dark, A minor Locrian. Some of this stuff is perhaps confusing, and it's not traditional in terms of the way someone might talk about it if you're analyzing, but that doesn't matter because the brief was for us, and take from this what you will, but I think you can do whatever you want as long as you understand the language that you're using. So I spoke about how at times this chord progression feels like it goes into Locrian, which is very dark, and I thought was suitable for Hell. And then Asgard, which is home to the other gods, the best known, most popular gods. Apparently I didn't decide on something here. A minor, smoother voice leading example. I don't know what I did at the end of the day, but hey, there is some analysis there for me to go back and do and try to work out what I did. Perhaps I've got a note somewhere of what I did. But yeah, that's basically a rundown of the brief. I hope that was interesting. And if there's any more questions, please feel free to comment or send me a message or whatever you do on YouTube. And I'll be happy to dive into it. Cheers.